Man, before I even started this video, I just want to say a big shout out to Nick, the barber. My previous barber, I don't know what he was doing. He had me wearing hats, beanies, but I didn't even want to go to church. So just a big shout out to Nick. Let's move on to the video. What is up, guys? So recently, Apple came out with the Apple Watch SE 2, and this was with some improvements from the previous generation, but it was also with some upgrades that they decided to add upon. Some of the changes they decided to make were some minor hardware tweaks, and then there's also some software upgrades, such as revamping the processor and even adding haptic feedback to the digital crown. Now, the question that might fall for some people is whether this is good enough to be your first Apple Watch, or whether or not they made some decent enough improvements from the previous generation where it's good enough for you to upgrade if you don't already have one. So given the similarity in prices, I don't think this will be a big enough reach that you may not want to upgrade just in terms of price points. But at the same time, what this also does is makes this an even more competitive watch when compared to the other ones, just based off price point. Now, obviously, I cannot advance without telling you the good news. The good news that if you subscribe, so stay tuned to my channel for more videos like this. Let's get on to it. So the first thing you have to consider is the fact that the watch comes in two sizes. There's a 40mm and then there's a 44mm. The one I'll be taking a look at today is the 40mm with GPS, with Starlight aluminum case and Starlight bands to match. Now, when it comes to presentation, Apple always does a good job, regardless of whether it's the Apple Watch Ultra, the SE, or even the Series 3. Now, the big differences really start to show when you analyze the screen, for example, the real estate. And on the fundamental side of things, the 40mm is still good enough to be able to read text without it looking kind of like 8-bit text. And that's also good in the fact that you can also change the text to whichever size you want it to be. Now, the display is also Retina display, but unfortunately it's not an always on display, and it only maxes out at about 1000 nits. Now, that's in comparison to, for example, the Apple Watch 7, 8, and Ultra. They all have the always on display, but this one unfortunately does not. And as for the bands, they're installed the same way that you install all the other bands for the Apple Watches. You have the small and the large bands depending on which wrist size you have. I would recommend, if you can, then go ahead and get maybe different material, different type of bands. I don't know, just for me personally, they feel a little odd to me. Sometimes I just have a mark on my wrist, like a scar, every time I put them way too long. So if you can get a different material or fabric, then I say go for it. Now, the most creative part is the watch faces and the watch design. Even though it's not an always on display, there's still a myriad of custom watch faces and displays that you can put, and you can customize them for yourself. And the fun part is that you can even take those customizations and even share them with your friends and family. Now, on the hardware side of things, the digital crown is basically like your home button, and it also does allow you to check and see all your apps. Now, the only difference is that it actually does have haptic feedback, and that's something that even the Watch Series 3 did not have. And holding the digital crown button will bring up Siri, and since the microphones are also located to the left of the watch itself, then you can literally talk to the watch and bring any answers up you want from the web. I, for example, am a big NFL junkie, so you already know what I'm looking at. And interestingly enough, the microphones also, without being able to listen to actual conversations, can detect within a spatial room or whatever environment you're in if the decibels are actually too loud for your ears, and recommend you to get out of there. And at the same time, if you're listening to video or playing music on your iPhone, then the digital crown can also be used to increase or decrease the volume without having to switch to your phone. And the lower button, which just for the sake of it, in this case we'll call it the little brother, once you press that, it will allow you to see your recently opened apps, and holding that will bring up the options to either turn the watch off, to call SOS, or even backtrack with the compass. Now, in straight up comparison to the previous Apple Watch SE, this one is a little thicker at 10.7mm, while the previous one was 10.4mm. And slightly disappointing for me is that they used the size to at least work more on the software aspect, where instead I would have at least preferred to see an increase in battery life. And sure, 18 is good enough, but I would have at least thought or expected they'd use the thicker size and thicker frame to at least add maybe even a couple more hours of just battery life into the watch. On the quality side of things, if you're a swimmer, then it's swim resistant for up to 50 meters, I believe. And if you're just sloppy and happen to spill water on it, it's still water resistant. Now, the Apple Watch Series 7, the Series 3, and I believe the first generation as well, all have fall detection, but the SE comes with the upgraded fall detection and crash detection. God forbid should you ever need either of those. Now, of course, this is a smartwatch, But there's also health apps that you can use to keep you in shape and at peace of mind. An example being the heart monitor and the mindfulness app. You can access audiobooks and podcasts and even Apple Music. There's cycle tracking, a redesigned compass app, an always on altimeter, and then there's also the family setup. Now, as I mentioned before, the battery life is up to 18 hours, but unfortunately it doesn't have fast charge like the Apple Watch Series 7, 8, or even the Ultra. And to be honest, depending on how much you use it, the battery life could last you till the next day, but bare minimum, it is going to last you the entire day on one complete charge. Now, the upside about this watch is the fact that it has the latest Apple Watch processor. It's the S8 with 64-bit dual-core processors, and in this regard, it's even more newer than the Watch Series 7 processor, the Series 3, and even the previous generation Watch SE. And if Bluetooth matters to you, I think for the most part, they all have Bluetooth 5.0. Including the Apple Watch SE2. Now, there's two ways to look at this from a consumer's perspective. If you're someone who's coming to this as this being your first Apple Watch, or if you're someone who's thinking about upgrading from a previous generation or a previous Apple Watch to this current one. And there'll be one quintessential software issue that is going to factor heavily if you're going to buy this one, regardless of if it was going to be your first Apple Watch or not. Now, of course, the first is being the processor, which is 20% faster than the previous Apple Watch SE processor, and at the same time it's also the latest processor for Apple Watch. And if you want to compare from the previous generation Apple Watch SE, they both have similar battery life at 18 hours, so there isn't really an upgrade in that regard. And honestly, my personal opinion, I would have preferred to get a longer battery life, but hey, you can't get everything. Now, the good thing about the second generation is it does have a way better processor, which means you get better performance, and it has a wider range of utilities and pre-installed software. So in my personal opinion, I do think it's worth upgrading from the previous generation Apple Watch SE to this one. You also save money in comparison to the Apple Watch 7, 8, and Ultra, while at the same time having a comparable processor. And if you want to compare it to the previous Apple Watch SE, the prices are similar, not too distant, but at the same time, again, the SE2 does come with a better processor, so you definitely do get an upgrade. I think getting it as a first timer for me is definitely a go ahead, and upgrading from the previous generation SE and even, for example, the Watch Series 3 is still worth it, but in my personal opinion, I just wish they had a better battery life. So of course, I'm just one man only with an opinion. At the moment, I haven't made up my mind. I'm thinking about even upgrading to the Watch Series 8 just to give it a shot, but I'm still on the fence at the moment. But if you, for one, are thinking about getting the Watch SE2, then it's definitely on my recommended list. But I want to know what you think. I'm Nadija. I'm out.